The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly under the twilight sky, a sea of pine and stone that had become Kong Do Hyen's entire world. 8 years he'd lived here, 8 years since he'd walked away from everything. The military, the cities, the memories that haunted him like ghosts. His cabin sat in a valley so deep that even the mail stopped coming after the first year. He'd built most of it himself, reinforcing the walls with steel plates he'd hauled in on an old truck that barely made the journey. Solar panels covered the roof, angled perfectly to catch the thin mountain sun. A vegetable garden sprawled to the south, neat rows of tomatoes and beans that he tended with the same precision he once used on military equipment. Do Hyen liked the routine. Wake at dawn, check the perimeter sensors, tend the garden, repair whatever needed fixing, eat, sleep, repeat. No surprises, no people, no chances to fail anyone ever again. He was checking the fence line when the sky screamed. The sound hit him first, a terrible shrieking that seemed to tear the air itself. Birds exploded from the trees in panic. His hands instinctively covered his ears as he looked up. A streak of blue-white light cut across the darkening sky, moving impossibly fast. It wasn't a meteor. Meteors didn't have small flames shooting from their sides like desperate attempts to slow down. The object, the ship, because what else could it be, slammed into his backfield with the force of a bomb. The ground bucked beneath Do Hyen's feet. He fell hard, his shoulder hitting a rock. Trees swayed. His workshop windows exploded in a shower of glass. The impact echoed through the valley like thunder that wouldn't stop. For several heartbeats, Do Hyen just lay there in the dirt, his ears ringing. Smoke rose from beyond the tree line. Small fires had started in the dry grass. His beautiful garden, the one he'd spent 3 years perfecting, was just gone. A massive crater sat where his tomatoes used to be. Part of him wanted to go back inside the cabin, lock the doors, pretend this wasn't happening. He'd come here to escape the world, and now the world, or something beyond it, had literally crashed into his backyard. But the engineer in him couldn't ignore it. And despite everything, despite 8 years of self-imposed isolation, Kong Do Hyen had once been a soldier. He grabbed his rifle from inside the cabin and moved toward the crash site. The ship was smaller than he expected, maybe the size of a large truck, but its design made no sense. The hull was smooth, with curves that flowed like water frozen in metal. Colors shifted across its surface, blue, then purple, then a bronze that seemed to glow from within. Fluids leaked from cracks in the hull, pooling in ways that seemed to ignore gravity. Some dripped upward. The smell hit him next. Ozone, like after a lightning strike. But also something else. Something spicy and sweet that he had no words for. This was alien in every sense of the word. A section of the hull had split open. Emergency lights flickered inside, casting strange shadows. Do Hyen approached slowly, his rifle raised, his heart hammering against his ribs. That's when he saw her. She lay crumpled in what looked like a pilot's seat, though the chair had too many sections for a human body. She was tall, over 7 feet, he guessed, with skin that shimmered like polished metal in the firelight, for arms hung limp at her sides. Her head was crowned with crystal-like structures, some broken and bleeding a fluid that glowed faint blue in the darkness. She wore elaborate clothing made of materials that seemed part fabric, part something living. It moved slightly even though she was still. Blood, if that's what was, stained her torso from several deep cuts. She was dying. Do Hyen didn't need medical training to see that. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. Her eyes, solid gold, no pupils, were half-closed. Every instinct told him to walk away. He'd chosen this life specifically to avoid complications, to avoid connections, to avoid the possibility of failing someone again. His wife and daughter had died because he'd missed a flaw in their car's brake system. One tiny mistake, and they were gone. He'd sworn never to be responsible for another life. But this alien woman was dying right in front of him. Do Hyen lowered his rifle. He'd been a combat engineer in the military. He'd pulled wounded soldiers from burning vehicles. He'd done field medicine under enemy fire. Some skills, apparently, didn't just disappear because you hid in the mountains. Damn it! He muttered to the empty forest. He set down his rifle and climbed into the wrecked ship. The alien was heavy, her forearms making it awkward to get a good grip. He pulled her free of the twisted metal, trying not to think about whether he was making her injuries worse. Her blood left glowing traces on his hands and clothes. It took him 20 minutes to drag her across the field to his workshop. He cleared his workbench with a sweep of his arm, tools clattering to the concrete floor. With a grunt of effort, he lifted her onto the surface. Under the harsh LED lights, her injuries looked even worse. Deep cuts across her torso, burns covering her left side. One arm bent at an angle that couldn't be right. But the wound in her abdomen worried him most. A puncture that went deep, probably hitting vital organs. Do-Hyun grabbed his trauma kit and got to work. His hands moved automatically, cleaning wounds, applying pressure to stop bleeding. Her blood clotted faster than human blood, which was probably the only reason she was still alive. He rigged and forward with saline solution, hoping her body could process it. He worked through the night, not really thinking, just doing. Suturing what he could, stabilizing what he couldn't, using every bit of knowledge he'd accumulated in 20 years of military service and 8 years of mountain solitude. As dawn light crept through the broken windows, Do-Hyun finally stepped back. The alien woman still breathed, steady now. Her golden eyes remained closed. He'd saved her. Probably. Maybe. And in doing so, Do-Hyun had just ended his isolation forever. 3 days passed before she woke. Do-Hyun was repairing a solar panel when he heard the crash from inside. He rushed in to find her sitting upright, all 4 arms raised offensively, her eyes, solid gold with no visible pupils, fixed on him with unmistakable hostility. "Stay back," she said, except the words came out garbled at first. A small device on her throat flickered with light, adjusting itself. "Stay back. Do not approach." Do-Hyun stopped in the doorway and slowly raised his hands. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, her 4 arms still raised like weapons. Her breathing was heavy, panicked. Then she looked down at her bandaged torso, at the 4 tube running into one of her arms. Confusion replacing the fear in those strange golden eyes. "You help me?" Her translator was working better now, smoothing out the rough edges in her voice. "Your ship crashed 3 days ago. You were bleeding out." Do-Hyun gestured carefully at his workbench, which was still covered in medical supplies and glowing blue stains. "I did what I could." She touched the bandages gently with one hand, feeling the stitches beneath. "Why would you help me? You do not know me. You do not know my people. You were dying on my property." That seemed like enough reason. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then, slowly, she lowered her arms. "I am Queen Nari of the Tarth Empire." She said it formally, like she expected the title to mean something. Do-Hyun almost laughed. An alien queen had crashed in his backyard. Of course she had. "I'm Do-Hyun, and you destroyed my garden." This time she did laugh, a sound like wind chimes that seemed completely at odds with her intimidating appearance. Then she winced and clutched her side. "I apologize for your garden. Why are you here? Earth isn't exactly on any maps I know about." Nari's golden eyes dimmed slightly. "That was the point. I needed somewhere no one would look for me." She paused, seeming to decide how much to tell him. "My military council wanted war. They wanted to expand our empire by destroying other civilizations. I refused, so they decided to replace me with someone who would obey. They tried to kill you." "Yes. I chose to run rather than become a puppet for genocide." She looked out the window at her wrecked ship. "I thought I could disappear. I was wrong." Do-Hyun understood running away better than he wanted to admit. He pulled up a stool, but kept his distance. "So what now?" "Now I repair my ship and leave before they find me. Your world will be safe. I will make sure of that." But repairing the ship wasn't simple. Over the next several days, Nari explained that she needed specific components from the wreckage. Her body also required special energy frequencies to heal properly, something her ship's medical bay could provide if they could get it working. They fell into an uneasy partnership. Do-Hyun would go into the crashed ship and retrieve parts that Nari described. She would direct them from the workshop, her engineering knowledge impressive despite her royal status. Her species had been building starships for thousands of years. Compared to that, Do-Hyen's human tools seem primitive. Your equipment is very basic. Nari observed one afternoon, watching him weld a support bracket, using techniques that would have been outdated 50 years ago. We work with what we have. That is not criticism. Your ability to improvise is remarkable. She was assembling a complex crystal matrix with her 4 hands, each working independently. My people would simply use a fabricator. You make things work through pure determination. Stubbornness, my wife used to call it. You have a mate? The question came so casually that it caught Do-Hyen off guard. His hand stilled on the welding torch. Had. Past tense. She died 8 years ago. My daughter, too. Nari's hand stopped moving. I am sorry. There was an accident with their car. I maintained it myself, checked everything. His voice was flat, emotionless from years of practice. But I missed something, a tiny flaw in the brake system. They went off a mountain road. He set down the torch. They died because I wasn't careful enough. Silence filled the workshop. Finally, Nari spoke, her voice softer than before. I had a mate also, a prince consort named Juno. When the military council demanded I support their war, he stood beside me in refusing. They executed him to send me a message. Her golden eyes met Do-Hyen's. I carry that weight every day. The knowledge that he died because of my choices. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment. 2 beings from different worlds, different species, but united by the same burden. Grief, guilt, the crushing weight of survivor's remorse. Help me fix my ship, Nari said quietly. I will leave, and your life can return to normal. You will never see me again. Do-Hyen nodded and went back to welding, but the words felt wrong somehow, because over the past week, something had changed in the cabin. The silence that had been his refuge for 8 years now felt different. When Nari worked on her equipment, she would hum strange melodies from a world light years away. When she explained tar technology, her 4 hands would gesture excitedly like a teacher with an eager student. When she talked about her empire, her people, there was love in her voice despite everything they'd done to her. The isolation Do-Hyen had built so carefully was cracking, and for the first time since his family died, he wasn't sure he wanted to repair it. That night, as Nari recharged in the medical pod they'd salvaged, Do-Hyen sat outside under the stars. Somewhere up there was her empire. Somewhere up there were the people hunting her. And somewhere in his workshop was an alien queen who'd crashed into his life and reminded him what it felt like to care about someone's survival. He thought isolation kept him safe from loss. But maybe he was starting to realize it had just kept him from living. The hunters arrived on the 12th day. Do-Hyen was testing Nari's regeneration chamber when every sensor on his property screamed simultaneously. 3 signatures, descending fast from orbit. The ships were smaller than Nari's, but moved with predatory precision. They found me. Nari stood up from the medical pod, her movement still careful, but much stronger than before. All 4 of her arms tensed. Do-Hyen, you need to leave. Now. They will kill anyone who has seen me. This is my property. Do-Hyen was already moving toward his weapons locker, his old military instincts taking over. I've got defensive positions prepared. Supplies. Equipment. If they want you, they'll have to go through me first. Why would you fight for me? We have known each other for less than 2 weeks. Do-Hyen pulled out his rifle and started loading magazines with practiced efficiency. You're standing in my home. That means something where I come from. Nari stared at him like he was speaking a language her translator couldn't process. You would die for a stranger? Hopefully it won't come to that. He opened another locker, revealing equipment that had nothing to do with peaceful mountain living. Explosives, ammunition, tactical gear. I wasn't always a hermit. The next 48 hours blurred together in frantic preparation. Do-Hyen revealed a truth he'd kept hidden even from himself. He hadn't just been any combat engineer in the military. He'd specialized in defensive warfare, in turning any location into a fortress. His quiet homestead had always been designed with one purpose: to keep the world out. Now, he would use it to keep the hunters out. Nari explained how her people fought. Tarth warriors were trained in honor combat. They used energy shields and powerful ranged weapons. They expected enemies to face them directly in open battle. Ambushes and traps were considered cowardly beneath their warrior code. Then we'll be cowards, Dohayan said, sketching defensive positions on a map of his property. Honor doesn't stop bullets. They worked together like soldiers who'd trained for years, instead of strangers who'd just met. Dohayan showed Nari where to place the mines he'd built from old military surplus. She salvaged weapons from her crashed ship, energy rifles that glow with internal power. Dohayan learned to fire them. The recoil different from human weapons, but manageable. They dug fighting positions in the tree line, set up kill zones with overlapping fields of fire, created fallback points if the outer defenses failed. Nari used her engineering knowledge to boost Dohayan's sensors, giving them early warning systems that could detect movement a kilometer away. During brief rest periods, they talked, not about tactics or weapons, but about life. Nari described her empire, hundreds of worlds connected by faster-than-light travel, cities that floated in the clouds, oceans where fish sang in frequencies that could shatter glass, a civilization so old that humans were still living in caves when the Tarth first reached the stars. "It sounds beautiful," Dohayan said. It was before the council became corrupt, before they forgot that strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them. Nari's four hands moved restlessly. "I miss it, but I cannot go back to what has become." Dohayan told her about Earth, the mountains and oceans, cities packed with millions of people, wars fought over resources and beliefs, humanity's constant struggle to survive despite being fragile and short-lived. "Your species sounds exhausting," Nari said, but there was warmth in her voice. "We are, but we don't quit, even when we should." On the 47th hour, the hunter ships landed in a clearing 1 kilometer away. 3 massive warriors emerged, each 1 8 feet tall and covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Their leader's voice boomed across the valley, amplified by speakers in his armor. "Nari of Tarth, you stand accused of treason against the Empire and cowardice in the face of duty. Surrender yourself for judgment. Your death will be quick and honorable." Dohayan and Nari looked at each other from their separate positions. She was in the workshop with her ship's weapon system. He was in a concealed bunker 50 meters away. A communication headset connected them. "Last chance to run," Nari said through the comm. "I'm exactly where I want to be. Humans are insane. You're just figuring that out now?" "Despite everything, despite the death approaching through the trees," Nari laughed. That wind chime sound that had become familiar over the past days. "When this is over, remind me to officially declare your species too stubborn to exist. I'll add it to my to-do list." The hunter commander's voice echoed again. "This is your final warning, traitor queen. Surrender or we will take you by force." Dohayan's finger rested on the detonator for the first mine. "Ready?" "Ready." "Then let's show them how humans fight." He pressed the button. The explosion lit up the twilight like a second sun, and the peaceful valley became a battlefield. The hunters had expected a queen in exile, weak and alone. Instead, they found a trained soldier and an alien engineer who'd turned 40 acres of Montana wilderness into a death trap. The first hunter's shield flared under blast, sparks flying. He stumbled, surprised, and Dohayan's rifle shot caught him in an exposed joint where his armor connected. The hunter fell, and his companions retreated behind cover. "First blood to the humans," Dohayan muttered into the comm. "Do not get overconfident," Nari warned. "They will adapt. They always do." She was right. The hunters regrouped, their initial shock replaced by cold professionalism. They sent drones ahead to detect mines. They advanced with overlapping shields, supporting each other. They were some of the finest warriors in the Tarth Empire, and they just realized this wouldn't be easy. But neither would Dohayan. He'd spent 8 years preparing for the worst, and the worst had finally arrived. The first assault came at dawn. The hunters advanced in formation, energy shields shimmering, confident in their superiority. They walked straight into the minefield. Do-Hyen had learned explosive engineering in the military. He'd spent 8 years perfecting it out of paranoia. The mines were crude by tar standards, simple chemical reactions and metal fragments. But they worked. The explosions erupted in sequence, tearing through the morning silence. The lead hunter's shield flared bright blue, then flickered and died under the concentrated blasts. He stumbled backward, his armor cracked and smoking. Do-Hyen's rifle was already aimed. One shot. The hunter dropped. The other two retreated immediately, dragging their wounded companion behind cover. Through his scope, Do-Hyen could see them arguing, their movements sharp and aggressive. They hadn't expected resistance. Certainly not from a primitive human. 1 down, 2 to go, Do-Hyen reported through the comm. Do not celebrate yet. Nari warned from her position. They will change tactics now. They will be angry. She was right. For the rest of that day, the hunters probed his defenses carefully. They sent small drones ahead to detect and detonate mines. They used their energy weapons to cut down trees, eliminating cover. They moved with overlapping shields, never exposing themselves to crossfire. But Do-Hyen had fought in urban warfare and mountain conflicts. He knew patience. He knew how to make every bullet count. And he knew how to use the terrain itself as a weapon. When the hunters tried to flank through the forest, they found tripwires connected to falling logs. When they attempted to approach in the creek, concealed explosives turned the water into a killing zone. When they fired their energy weapons at his bunker, the shots reflected off angled metal plates he'd installed years ago. Hour after hour, the battle continued. Do-Hyen would fire from one position, then immediately move to another before return fire arrived. Nari provided covering fire from the workshop, her ship's weapon tracking targets with computer precision. They communicated constantly, coordinating like a team that had trained together for months. On the second day of fighting, one hunter finally breached the inner perimeter. He was fast, faster than any human could be. He crashed through the workshop wall in an explosion of splintered wood and twisted metal. Do-Hyen was there in seconds, but the hunter already had him cornered. The alien warrior stood 8 feet tall, for arms holding different weapons, armor scorched but intact. His golden eyes, so similar to Nari's but filled with hate, locked onto Do-Hyen. Primitive creature, the hunter growled through his translator. You die with honor I do not grant to traitors. The fight was brutal. Do-Hyen had no illusions about matching the alien in strength or reach. Instead, he used everything his military training had taught him about close combat. He threw a flashbang he'd kept in his vest. The hunter's advanced eyes couldn't compensate fast enough. He staggered, temporarily blinded. Do-Hyen moved in low, a knife in hand, targeting the joints in the armor where it was weakest. The hunter swung blindly, one massive arm catching Do-Hyen in the ribs and sending him crashing into his workbench. Pain exploded through his chest. Definitely broken ribs. But the hunter was still blind, still disoriented. Do-Hyen grabbed a welding torch on the floor, ignited it, and drove the white-hot flame into the exposed joint he'd cut. The hunter screamed, a sound that seemed impossible from such a powerful warrior, and fell to one knee. Do-Hyen didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rifle and fired 3 shots point-blank into the weakened armor. The hunter collapsed. Humans, the dying warrior rasped, his translator crackling. What manner of creatures are you? The kind that doesn't quit, Do-Hyen said, then collapsed against the wall, clutching his injured ribs. Nari found him there minutes later. You are hurt. I'll live. 2 left now. That night, while the remaining hunters regrouped, Do-Hyen and Nari executed the real plan they'd been building toward. Using parts from Nari's ship and Do-Hyen's communication equipment, they constructed a broadcast system powerful enough to reach across space to the Tarth Empire. Nari stood before the camera. They'd rigged up. Her 4 arms hung at her sides. Her royal bearing returned despite the destruction around her. She looked every bit the queen she claimed to be. Citizens of the Tarth Empire, she began, her voice steady and strong. I am Queen Nari, and I speak truth to you now. The military council attempted to force me into a war of expansion. They demanded I authorize genocide against innocent worlds who had done us no harm. When I refused, When I stood by the principles our empire was founded upon, they named me traitor. She gestured to the battlefield around her. I found refuge on a primitive world called Earth. I met a human named Kondo Hyan, who knew nothing of our empire or our ways. He saved my life when I was dying. He defended me against trained warriors when he had no reason to. This human has shown more honor than our finest soldiers. Her golden eyes seemed to look through the camera, across the vast distance of space. I call on you now, my people. Resist this corruption. Remember what we once stood for. Remember that true strength protects the weak, rather than conquers them. I will return when our empire remembers its soul. They broadcast a message on every frequency Nari knew. It shot into space, riding invisible waves toward her distant home. The response on the hunter's ships was immediate and furious. Both vessels opened fire with everything they had, no longer caring about capture. They wanted to destroy all evidence, eliminate all witnesses. The homestead exploded in flames. Trees ignited. The ground itself seemed to burn. Do-Hyan and Nari ran for the bunker as the world turned to fire around them. But across the stars, the message traveled. And in the Tarth Empire, people began to listen. The final battle lasted 3 hours. The hunters, desperate now, threw everything at them. Do-Hyan and Nari fought side by side, human and alien, defending ground neither would abandon. The 2 remaining hunter ships circled overhead like predators, their weapons turning the valley into hell. Energy blasts carved smoking craters into the earth. Trees exploded into splinters. The workshop collapsed in flames. Everything Do-Hyan had built over 8 years was being systematically destroyed. But they kept fighting. When Nari's energy rifle ran out of power, Do-Hyan tossed her his backup weapon. When a blast knocked Do-Hyan off his feet, Nari's covering fire drove the hunters back. They moved like dancers who knew each other's steps, predicting movements, covering weaknesses. "We cannot win this," Nari shouted over the explosions. Her 4 arms were bleeding from shrapnel wounds. "There are too many of them." "Then we change the game." Do-Hyan was staring at Nari's crashed ship, still partially intact in the crater. His engineer's mind was working through possibilities. "Your ship still has power, right? Still has fuel." "Yes, but the engines are destroyed. It cannot fly. It doesn't need to fly. It just needs to explode." Understanding dawned in Nari's golden eyes. "That is suicide." "No, that's improvisation." Do-Hyan was already running toward the wreckage. "We lure them in close, set the reactor to overload, and get clear before it blows." They worked frantically while energy blasts rained around them. Do-Hyan rigged the ship's power core to cascade failure, while Nari modified the reactor safeties. It was dangerous work. One mistake, and they'd detonate immediately, but they'd run out of options. "Ready?" Do-Hyan asked, his fingers on the trigger mechanism. "Ready?" They broadcast a fake surrender on all frequencies. "This is Queen Nari. I yield. Stop firing. I will come peacefully." The hunter ships descended, circling lower. They wanted confirmation. They wanted to see their target captured. Both vessels moved into position directly above the crashed ship, their weapons still trained on the bunker where Do-Hyan and Nari were supposedly hiding. "Now!" Do-Hyan triggered the detonation. The explosion was massive, a miniature sun that turned night into day. The blast wave threw Do-Hyan and Nari from their real hiding spot 50 meters away, both of them tumbling across scorched ground. One hunter ship vaporized instantly, simply ceased to exist. The second ship, caught at the edge of blast, spun wildly with its engines destroyed and crashed into the forest. Do-Hyan's ears rang. His vision swam. Everything hurt, but he was alive. Nari pulled herself up on all 4 arms, bleeding but functional. Humans are absolutely insane. Worked, didn't it? Before the remaining hunter could escape his crashed ship, new contact appeared in the sky. Ships, dozens of them, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. But these were different. These carried royal insignias. Tar vessels, but loyal to the Queen. The Loyalist fleet had arrived. Nari's message had worked. What followed over the next weeks was chaos beyond anything Dohayan had imagined. Military ships from Earth scrambled when alien vessels appeared in orbit. First contact protocols that existed only in theory suddenly became desperately necessary. Diplomats arrived at his destroyed homestead in helicopters, along with soldiers, scientists, and politicians who all wanted answers. Nari supporters had rallied across the Tarth Empire. The coup had failed, but now Earth's location was known across the galaxy, and humanity had to decide what that meant. Dohayan testified before a hastily assembled coalition of Earth governments. He sat in a temporary building erected near his property, still bandaged in the battle, and told them the truth. They could have destroyed us easily, he said. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. But Queen Nari chose to protect Earth instead. She risked everything to prevent a war that would have eventually reached us. We have a choice now. Treat them as enemies and guarantee conflict, or work towards something better. Nari addressed both her people and the humans in a joint broadcast. She stood tall despite her injuries. Every bit the queen she'd always been. This human, Dohayan, showed me what true courage means. He stood against trained warriors to protect someone he barely knew. If one human possesses such honor, imagine what our peoples might achieve together. I propose an alliance built on mutual respect, not conquest. 6 months later, Dohayan stood in what used to be his garden. The massive crater had been filled and converted into a landing pad. His small cabin had been expanded into a joint embassy, half human construction and half Tarth technology. Ships from both worlds now shared orbital space above Earth. Cautious but cooperative, Nari walked up beside him. She'd chosen to remain on Earth as the primary Tarth representative. She wore simpler clothing now, adapted for Earth's gravity and climate. Her injuries had healed completely, leaving only faint scars. "The Council want me to return to the Empire," she said. "But I think my work here is more important." "How convenient," Dohayan said with a slight smile. "Considering you've basically moved into my guest room. Your planet is growing on me. Strange weather, primitive technology, but interesting people." She looked at him. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you humans don't accidentally start an interstellar war." They walked through the reconstructed garden together. Earth vegetables grew alongside Tarth crops that glowed faintly in the twilight. It was a small thing, but it represented something larger. Two species learning to coexist, to share, to build something neither could create alone. "Do you regret it?" Nari asked. "Your isolation is gone. Your peaceful life ended the moment I crashed here." Dohayan considered the question. For 8 years, he'd hidden in these mountains. He convinced himself that isolation was safety, that avoiding connection meant avoiding pain. But isolation hadn't healed him. It had just frozen his grief in place. "I spent 8 years running from my past," he said finally. "Turns out the universe had other plans. Sometimes you need an alien queen to crash in your backyard to remember what living actually means." Nari's laugh was like wind chimes, a sound he'd grown to appreciate. And sometimes a queen needs a stubborn human to remind her why leadership matters. Above them, another ship descended through the atmosphere, carrying diplomats for the next round of negotiations. Dohayan's quiet valley had become the center of first contact, the bridge between two civilizations learning to trust each other. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings, conflicts. But there would also be possibilities neither species had imagined. Dohayan had lived alone for 8 years, hiding from the world and from himself. But he wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time since losing his family, he felt something he'd thought was gone forever. He felt at peace. The end.